So as often happens, if I just waited about 10 minutes to do a video, I could add some more information and some context. I just put up a video about DC layoffs, in particular the clickbaity kind of the world is ending bloodbath headlines. Well, there have been some layoffs. As I mentioned in the last video, some were coming. The bloodbath is your own perception, and DC Comics is coming to an end. This is the end. Terrible, destructive news is people trying to get clicks. So let's talk a little bit about what we know and understand the news is changing and try and give you a little bit of advice on how to look at this and how to track kind of the developments as they're happening. Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is almost a lesson in perspective. So like I said, I did this video. If I waited about 10 minutes, literally as it uploaded, went out, and I think I had like 4 views. More information dropped. Some of which from Asher Elbin from Twitter. You might not notice because he's got like everybody in the world blocked through massive use of blockchains. But who cares about him anyway? But if you were able to see his tweets, fine. He is kind of a part and parcel with what Rich Johnson is doing over at Bleeding Cool with bloodbaths. Bloodbath is the word of the day because who doesn't like a good bloodbath? In fact, the headline of Bleeding Cool, DC Comics editorial bloodbath going on right now. I want to say at this point, when people lose their jobs, as I said in the last video, it's unpleasant, it's it's my heart goes out to them, it's scary, it's lousy. Everything is bad about it. Nothing is good about people losing their jobs. Even if, and this is just me, if I absolutely hate the people who are getting laid off, I still feel for them. Losing your job, like losing a family member, like any tragedy, it's tough. And I think that is, I feel for those people, which is one of the reasons maybe that I get object to words like editorial bloodbath and like, click here for the latest news. That's the kind of stuff that really irks me because it is, it doesn't seem sensitive to the people involved. But whatever, everybody's got their own mileage. What do we know? Well, first off, like I mentioned in the previous video, Variety has numbered about 650 layoffs coming from Warner Brothers. Now, this was something that was known. We knew these layoffs were coming because during the acquisition, as I mentioned in the previous video, it was said that the company would look for redundancies, they'd look for places where there were overlap, and that some jobs would definitely be lost as companies synergized and looked for optimization and reduced redundancies, all those happy words that are kind of the polar opposite of things like bloodbath and equally distasteful in my mind. So this was expected, and people have been expecting it for, in fact, there's been a couple false starts. And, there's a number of different pieces everywhere, but at the surface, what's happening is consolidation. As I mentioned, groups are folding into each other, and that's what's going on. This is an important thing to remember because as we're seeing the videos and the comments around this is the end of the universe. No, it's a very tragic event for some people's jobs. It is folding together. This is the corporate world, sped up a little bit, probably by the pandemic, shifting business priorities, streaming, and everything else. So obviously emotional for people, and I get where the people involved would call it a bloodbath, but this is not how we should report on news, but that's just me. At any rate, what do we know? Well, right now we know a bunch of rumors. What does appear true, at least from the rumors, some people I have talked to personally, I posted a video, I then had a couple calls, and now I'm doing the second one. Bob Harris is apparently gone at the company or is being wound out. It's sometimes a little hard to tell which is which. So who is Bob Harris? Bob Harris is editor-in-chief at DC Comics. He's been at DC Comics for, I think, nearly 20 years. He is pretty key. I want to say key, but he's been kind of a quiet behind the scenes person in a lot of cases. He definitely has influence. He's a long-standing kind of member of comics. He was editor-in-chief at Marvel for 5 years in the late 90s. He has a legendary feud with Mark Waid that's been going on. So start the rumors now, by the way. Mark Waid, new editor-in-chief, DC Comics. It's going to happen. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. No, I'm saying that in jest. At any rate, Bob Harris does appear to be affected. as well as Brian Cunningham. So who's Brian Cunningham? Brian Cunningham is a senior story editor, producer at DC Comics. Now, Brian Cunningham, by the way, there's a lot of different, going to be a lot of different perspectives on all this, but Cunningham had kind of, I want to say migrated, but he'd moved slightly into being kind of a producer role. He'd I'm trying to describe his role properly. He was dealing with a lot of kind of these other opportunities for comics and attachments, and I'm doing a poor job of it at any rate. I should have just got the person who called me to just give a statement. But at any rate, Brian Cunningham does appear to be on, and then Andy Curry. So who's Andy Curry? Well, that name might be a little bit more familiar to people on Twitter because he was very outspoken. He came from a Comic Alliance where he wrote a bunch of articles. He's one of those the people that a lot of people say is a bad guy because of kind of his statements. He likes to poke. He was one of the people that was all over the Wonder Woman variant covers, Stunning and Brave, and all the rest. And he seems to enjoy poking people, and in particular poking people who don't agree with him. He was last kind of in charge of the Vertigo line, which this last iteration, whatever you want to call it, it was not successful. I guess I'll put it that way. And he's done some things with Black Label and Young Animal. The other name here is Mark Doyle. So Mark Doyle is the executive editor at DC Black Label, and he was kind of had some things going against him. He had the Batman penis from Batman Damned kind of fell on his shoulders, which was a bit unfair in a lot of ways. I think this was not his cross to bear, but there was rumors for quite a long time that he was not on the outs, but at least there was some riff there with the company. Those are the big names. The other name that I've heard exactly two opposite stories is Bobby Chase. So Bobby Chase is somebody who I like quite a bit. Have had a very, I would say, not a friendship, but close to Bobby Chase, and I think obviously an incredible person, incredible woman. Bobby Chase is she has been in charge of kind of digital strategy, and I think it makes sense. I don't like it, but it makes sense why her name would be on this list. I would say, just for whatever it's worth, I think Bobby Chase, obviously she edited some of my favorite Marvel comics throughout the 80s and 90s. She was one of the Marvel Group's editor-in-chief. One of the first, I think the first female editor that achieved that level at Marvel. And Lord, if you could put Bobby Chase like back at Marvel running the show, like we could just, this is my own personal type, you just pluck old Mr. Brevoort out and put Bobby Chase in there. Happy days. I'm sorry, that sounds a little ghoulish, but Bobby Chase, if true, I think that would be of all the names on there, that would be a big blow to me personally. I think that she is just incredible, meant a lot to talent and everything else. So a lot of news. So and then there's other little comments. Once again, I think this Asher Albion made the comment that Jim Lee is still with the company but no longer publisher. That one, again, I heard a flat denial again from somebody. So who knows what is happening? But I will say, on the same token, I've heard a number of people say that Jim Lee didn't like that role and wants out of it. And this his time there when Dan Didio was removed was kind of always meant to be temporary. So I think if his role has shifted, I would think that would have a lot less to do with the layoffs and everything else that's going on here, and a lot more to do with kind of what's planned there. So that's and then there's a lot of names being tossed around here. And kind of what's going on with layoffs and everything else. So a couple reactions. One, clearly, if there was one thing DC Comics needed, it was less editors. I'm sorry, that's very tongue-in-cheek, but what the hell? If all the layoffs, why are you doing an editorial? I'm just saying. I think that again, everything I said in the previous video is true. We knew things were coming. We knew there was going to be some redundancies. We knew that kind of with the collapsing of the business and clearly how DC is positioning itself around having its, more control over its own distribution, being more tightly aligned with some of the other groups within Warner Media, serving up content in that way, what they're doing with digital, kind of all these different moves. It makes sense that they're doing a changing of the guard of a lot of their editorial staff. Does that make it easier? Does it make it pleasant for people? Absolutely not, but it makes sense. Some of the names on the list, again, people like Andy Curry, you could point to as somebody who ran some unsuccessful lines. And as I mentioned again in the last video, the collapsing of these lines makes sense. I think that Mark Doyle, if it is true that he had a kind of shadow over him, that also makes sense. And I think, like I said, Bob Harris, again, had been in that role for a long time, paves the way for Mark Wade. Sorry to have to make that joke again. But I think that all these pieces, they make a weird sort of sense, even if they're painful, if that makes any sense. I think they definitely fit with DC's kind of shifting of how things are working. None of that is good. So then I think we get to kind of what does this restructuring mean? What comes next? So first off, obviously, if you're on social media, you're hearing all kinds of like the world is falling. Well, one of the reasons why I think you're seeing so much noise is that a couple names on this list, probably most notable among them, the DC editor Andy Curry, Corey, whatever. There was that was the source of a lot of information. Honestly, on social media, at Bleeding Cool, at news sites like that. So, of course, him being impacted is going to carry a heavy weight, even maybe an abnormal weight of what it does. Bobby Chase is well loved by the industry, if that's true. Brian Cunningham, again, there's some well loved people. Bob Harris, been in the institution a long time, probably shaky, has a much more, I'd say, checkered past to a lot of people in terms of whether they love him or not. But that's why you're seeing a lot of emotion. A lot of these people are big names with lots of ties, and in many cases, ties to other people. And so that is what is happening. Restructuring like this, especially at the editorial level, feels a lot more like the company trying to transform itself like we've been seeing over the last 4 months. I think I actually mentioned about 4 months ago that when they were making their moves to digital, in fact, I'm sure I did, that we would see editorial and senior management layoffs, that would happen at some point as the kind of a final step to all the restructuring that's going on. Some people are doing live streams right now talking about how this is the end for DC Comics, and they're really going hard in the paint for bloodbath as the word. Again, I think that's insensitive. I think it does a very poor job of explaining what is going on and why. And, your mileage may vary, I guess is the point here. So there you go. I just need to wait another 10 minutes. I'd get better data in the videos and everything else. A tough situation of everything that's happening. There's a whole DC collectors, aspect to all this. And the weirdest take I'm seeing in everything is the DC Fandom, that event that's coming out. It's like, oh my God, why would they do this right before DC Fandom? I don't know. I guess would it be better somehow if they did the event and then laid off all the people? I don't know. It seems cruel too. So none of this is good. But again, this is not the entire world coming apart. It's tough, but it's not the world coming apart, and that's really, really key. It's key to keep these things in perspective. Sad for the people, not disastrous for the company. We are in the midst of a transformation. That's what's happening. I did a video with Wes, and I alluded to it on this channel as well, that something similar is coming for Marvel. And I think Marvel will be more shocking for people because DC has been making all of these moves all along. They've been making all these different shifts and changes and everything else. Marvel has not. They've been kind of laying low, but this is absolutely coming for Marvel within the next 3 to 6 months. No doubt about it. And that one will definitely have a similar level of emotion and everything else. As a final statement, what should we expect out of this? Well, some people are telling you're going to expect the woke apocalypse, where everything's going to look like Steven Universe and that new Wonder Woman will be the new Wonder Woman and everything else. I would remind everybody that, hey, they canceled 5G and that whole kind of a rebranding of the DC universe for a reason. And when they're doing layoffs like this and they're trying to align with their corporate partners, the last thing they're going to do is try and toss a bunch of random, never been tested out characters into the mix. If anything, this is a back to basics. I will continue to point that out, and it continues to be true. But I know that doesn't make the headlines. Anyway, I'll conclude with this. My heart goes out to the people who are impacted. As always, if you are impacted and I can help you, reach out. I'm happy to help. I'm connected with several of the people I mentioned and others on LinkedIn and other places. I am more than happy to help you out and do what I can do in my small, humble way. I feel bad for you. I especially feel bad for you kind of having this giant cloud of the world is coming apart over you as well. If you're a DC fan, the comics will continue. Life will go on. Doesn't mean there's not problems in the industry. Like I said in the previous video, there are plenty of problems in the industry, but try and keep it in perspective. Comments, thoughts below, please let me know. I'll try and answer whatever I can. We'll see where this story goes. Thanks for listening.